Good day and welcome to another episode of From Stigma to Strength, keeping you and your mind well. And today we have some great guests and I'm happy to have them here. And I'm going to have them, I'm your host, Nancy Reardon, sorry, forgot to say that. And I'm going to have my guests introduce themselves to you.
Hi, I'm John Crocker. I'm the Director of School Mental Health and Behavioral Services for Methuen Public Schools.
And how long have you been with the school department?
15 years.
15 years, that's excellent. And we all know you.
I'm Brandi Kwong, the Superintendent for Methuen Public Schools. I've been with Methuen Public Schools for 22 years.
22 years,
6
wow.
as the superintendent.
That's great. Thank you both for coming, and I'm looking forward to this. So today's show, we're going to focus on mental health issues in the school, how they approach them, and so we're going to jump right into it. And so tell me a little bit first about your position, what you do.
Sure. So my day-to-day is really providing a lot of clinical supervision and monitoring those services that we have across the district. We've developed a comprehensive school mental health system, and we have a lot of counselors and school psychologists and school social workers that we deploy across the schools to be able to provide care to students. So they provide a lot of group and individual services, and we engage in universal mental health screening to identify students early. So a lot of those programs and those services are the things that I monitor, and I provide a lot of supervision to the staff, so all of the staff across the district in the counseling department.
And Brandi, how do they go from, how do you identify a student who has an issue, a mental health issue? I don't want to say issue, that's wrong, please take
Identify,
that back.
Right. Concern. So I'll start the conversation and I'll let Mr. Crocker, continue it just because there's a lot of details. But, one of the things that Mr. Crocker just mentioned is mental health screening. And that is something that we got involved with in Methuen Public Schools probably a good 8 to 10 years ago. And that was when I was assistant superintendent and Mr. Crocker was the director of guidance. We were involved in some joint grant partnerships, working with the University of Maryland, working with the state here in Massachusetts for positive behavioral supports. So we're really trying to enhance our services that we were providing kids because we were seeing the changes happening 10 years ago with what our students needed. We were definitely ahead of the game with mental health screening. We approached it slowly, but the rollout was really successful when we had the screenings, and we now have students from grades 3 through 12.
We're actually K-12 now.
K-12 now screened developmentally appropriately. And so we can identify students, and once they're identified, depending on how they identify on these specific screeners, which that's what Mr. Crocker can talk about a little bit, how that works, that's when the counselors then decide who's going to be seen first, what the appropriate supports are. Is it at the school level? Is it at the outside level? Is it both? So we have a lot of ways to identify kids pretty quickly here in Methuen. And again, we were doing that pre-pandemic. And then post-pandemic, certainly it escalated, the need for that escalated, but we already had the systems in place, which was really a fantastic place for us to be.
Right. So you don't screen every student?
We do. So universal screening is meant to be a screen that covers the entire student population.
Right.
What we do is, so K-12, we have different measures that we use. In the K-4 grade band, we're really looking at identifying general mood. We're not going to get into deep specific questions with a kindergartner, but we are, trying to identify students that have needs and be more proactive around those needs. Across our district, we screen for various different topics: anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, substance use, social emotional competence as well. And this allows for us to get ahead of problems and look for emerging concerns. One of the biggest problems that we face as a mental health, in the mental health field is stigma and also reactivity. So the national average wait time for a student to get care, for anyone to get care after they start to experience a mental health problem, is 8 to 10 years. And that is, a lot of that is a function of reactivity. So we could be more preventative, we could be more proactive, but we often don't raise this topic. We don't put this on the table for students to ask for help. So screening represents one of the foundational features of a comprehensive system of support so that we can actually find students early and intervene early and route them into services.
And how do you screen them? I mean, are they screened when they first enter the school system, like a kindergarten
Yeah.
child?
So we administer these screening tools on a regular basis. For our youngest students, it's actually on a higher frequency basis. So weekly, they'll get questions about kind of how they're feeling and whether or not they are having problems at school or at home.
Okay.
For our older population, it's twice a year. So we'll do a fall and a spring screen, and that will allow for us to react to those data and provide services to students that are identified.
I see. So it's on an individual basis that it's done.
On a schedule. So
Right.
just as an
Yeah.
example, like at the high school, in the fall, we'll screen grade 9 all at once, and the counseling staff will react to that. They'll pull students down and talk to them and ask them questions about whether or not that the data that is represented in the screen is valid, because we never want to react to the data and make decisions solely based on the data. We want to have a conversation with the student and see if they require care.
Now, you had mentioned, one of the questions here I have is, does the school department have a network of therapists available to students and parents? And you did say you have a hand.
We do.
counselors.
So I guess I want to talk about two things here. We have a tremendous counseling department staff, and they're all master's level counselors. So they provide evidence-based therapeutic care to students across all the schools, across all grade levels. So I would say primarily, I want to just kind of underscore that Methuen has invested tremendously in building a staffing model that really provides internal capacity, internal care to students.
Right.
So we do not have to solely rely on outpatient providers. That being said, we have established some really strong relationships with our outpatient providers, our community-based mental health agencies, primarily through Care Solace, which is a service that we have purchased as a district to be able to tap into a network of providers. It's actually a national network of
What
providers.
is it called?
It's called Care Solace.
Okay.
This is available to all students. It's also available to all staff and all staff family members. So it really serves as an opportunity for
Student family members.
and student family members. Yeah. So. So any of those individuals can tap into this care matching platform.
And how do they get in touch with a hold of it?
A counselor could make a referral into Care Solace. They can refer themselves. So there's a portal for families and for students to access. Obviously, you do need consent. So
Right.
Students
Parental
typically
consent.
are parental
Yeah.
consent. So students accessing this are really accessing it through their family. But
Now, if a child wanted to keep some of the issues to themselves, could they access this portal for themselves, or alone, or does a parent have to access it?
The family would have to facilitate that,
Right.
because there's insurance questions, there
Oh,
are
okay,
issues
yeah.
related to getting consent for a minor to get care.
Right.
But that being said, families can access this anonymously or confidentially,
Yeah.
and the schools don't have to be involved in that.
Right.
But we always recommend, let us help you. Let us help
Yeah.
you navigate this process.
Do you get a lot of children, older children, who have an issue but don't tell my mom and dad, but they want to talk to a counselor?
Sure. Yeah,
And
definitely.
it's kept confidential even though they're minors?
So
I mean,
yeah,
unless it's something grand.
Yep,
you know.
there are limits to confidentiality that we have to follow.
Right.
If a student represents, or if they've indicated that they're potentially a danger to themselves or others, we have
Well,
to
yeah.
involve
Yeah.
other people. We have to disclose that information.
Do they get mad at you?
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of times where a student doesn't want to share something, but we
Yeah.
actually have to, and we explain that this is for their safety, their
Of
well-being.
course it is, yeah.
But if this is a non-crisis situation and students are asking for us to maintain confidentiality, then we do provide that confidentiality, and we explain to parents that when we're engaging in services with your student, we really want to create a situation where we can establish good rapport with the student, and that means that we're not going to share every detail of the service. We want to give them the opportunity to talk to a trusted adult.
No, Superintendent, when do you get involved, or do you try? I mean, if it's a really rough situation, then you would get involved.
So that's a great question, and I want to, before I answer that, do you mind if I just clarify even
Of
further
course.
something that Mr. Crocker said, because sometimes people who might be watching don't understand. We talk about this all the time, and I just want to make sure that it's clear. When we talk about students being screened, we do this through the device. So we do this through questionnaires that happen on the iPad or the
I figured
Chromebook.
that, yeah.
And sometimes people are like, how do you do that? Like, are you actually sitting one-to-one with these students? And
Because
answer
there's
these-
so many students.
and so I always want to just clarify that, because people who don't understand the process, it's a set of questions that is already vetted across the country. These aren't questions that we made up just here in Methuen, right? It's questions that are vetted. They screen for very specific things. Our counselors know how to, analyze the results of that to determine the priority.
Right.
And I think that's really important, because again, this is our world and we know it and live it. And sometimes people who don't work with the numbers of students that we work with just don't understand how we do this, right?
Yeah,
and
I'm glad you said that,
it's
because
scheduled and it's a process, and we don't do whole schools at once, like Mr. Crocker said. We do all of 9th grade, and then the counselors tackle the 9th grade, and then in a few more
move
months,
on.
you do a different screener for maybe a different mental health concern, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's depression or trauma or suicidal. Can't say
I know
it.
what you mean.
Suicidality, or suicidal tendencies. I can say either one. But there's a process to that and a calendar, as he alluded to. So it's not overwhelming for the staff as well, right? So our staff trying to treat, we take a very careful lens to who we are servicing and the priorities of that service. So I did want to say that.
No, I do appreciate you explaining that. That's why I kept asking.
It's something I wanna make sure
And then
that
I'm like, I get it. They do great, but thank you for
so like
clarifying
if you imagine a kindergarten student taking a screener, you're talking about like smiley faces as an answer, right? Not a verbal or written answer, because that's developmentally appropriate to get a gauge of how are you feeling today with smiley faces.
Right, like when you go to the doctors,
Yes.
one or
So
sad
it's
or happy.
We want people to understand
That's how
that.
I take tests, sad or happy, so yeah.
We just want people to understand, like, we're developmentally approaching each grade, the age of the students, so that it makes sense for the student, right?
course.
Students aren't going to understand even the language. A kindergartner is not going to understand what a 5th grader is going to understand. So I just wanted to clarify.
Perfect.
No, that's fair.
But when I get involved,
when you get involved,
I think so. I am aware of situations that if they've been brought to the level of Mr. Crocker, and we have concerns of harm or threat to the student or other students, I am typically involved in those situations. I'm also informed by principals and guidance and Mr. Crocker and Ms. Tatro at the high school if we have students who are hospitalized for mental health concerns. So, it's more of an informed, sometimes we talk through things. I think the thing that we're seeing a lot more, I can say this in my career, going from principal to assistant superintendent to superintendent, things I never dealt with as a principal, our principals are dealing with now on a daily basis of, parents reaching out, kids reaching out, saying my friend or I, need help, or putting that in right. We have email. It's easier to communicate with the adults in the school now, and so over the weekend, a student might feel really comfortable emailing a staff member, and so what process do we go and what action do we take? And so we have that in place, right? We have protocols for those things in place. So I'm definitely made aware and informed when we have, a
major situation.
Serious situations, which is unfortunately more often and more frequent now than it has been in the past. Kids. We have kids who are hospitalized at a younger age, and return to school, and trying to figure out how to help them return to school after they're hospitalized for mental health concerns. We're seeing that more at the grammar schools than we probably ever have.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's if I were to point to any one thing, I think I'd be missing the larger, kind of landscape of issues.
Right.
I think that, for sure, the pandemic had a
Just gonna say
massive
that
impact.
didn't help.
We're talking about students who were isolated, inactive, told to stay away from others. And that was necessary, but at the same time, it created a situation where isolation became something that was easier to happen.
Yeah, that was one of the questions. What are some of the changes you noticed in mental health needs before versus after the pandemic?
We have a pretty unique view of this compared to really almost any other district in the country. We have a data set that extends back about 10 years. So we could see the trajectory of our student needs over time. And you can see when the pandemic hit, there was this massive increase in needs associated with anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, 2 to 3 times greater rates of moderate and severe problems related to depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic
Isolation
stress.
must have been, I mean.
A ton.
Yeah, I mean, I had 2 grandkids at home that their parents both had to work. There was no choice for them, and what were they called, the iPads that they worked on?
Notebooks, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
notebooks. And having them sit there, they would rather have talked to their friends
Right.
than do schoolwork. We're home, why should we do schoolwork? But, just stay
It was
there
very
and do
challenging. I think we spent a lot of time talking about the challenges.
Yeah.
We had academic challenges at the younger ages,
it. Right.
because they missed those foundational skills and building, social as well.
And
But
one-on-one.
they've seemed to have recovered socially.
Yeah.
The middle school students, right, that early middle school,
Yeah.
more concerned about the social, because developmentally, they need to be
They
with
need
other
that,
kids. Yeah.
yeah.
So we had just a lot of conversations about the potential impact, right? And then the high school, same thing, right? The high school was still able to have some of those social interactions because we still were able to have some sports,
Yeah.
right? We were able to sneak some of those things in with the high school during that time,
Right.
but certainly not as widespread as we would have liked. But we were very cognizant of, at each level, what we were looking at and what we were headed into, right?
Right,
What we
right.
knew we were going to have to do academically and focus, what we knew we were going to have to do social emotionally and focus. So, right now, to have some of our, and I'm going to say 7th and 8th grade I'm just going to focus there and you can correct me, but our 7th and 8th grade who we're seeing, and again, it has not been typical to see 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids hospitalized, right? Needing a bed and service immediately as much as it has been in the past 2 years. And
Yeah.
these are the kids who were in 4th, 5th, 6th grade,
Right,
right,
right.
as the pandemic was hitting. And so, again, I think we would be remiss saying that's it, that's why, because there's
Yeah.
other reasons behind that, but we certainly can't say that wasn't part of the impact of what's happening right now, especially with our 7th, 8th, 9th graders. Again, we're very in tune to that in our conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I would just throw out there that, the youth mental health crisis has gotten a lot of press lately. It's
sure.
something that the Surgeon General is calling out, CDC, American Academy for Pediatrics, and rightfully so. It's a huge problem. But we had a mental health crisis for youth before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
is something that we tried to provide a ton of services and supports to address long ago. The difference is now we're talking about 2 to 3 times greater rates.
Yeah.
And that is just think about a district that maybe didn't invest in mental health services for kids until after the pandemic. That's a massive learning curve. And that's a tremendous amount of resources that they have to put into place to address that problem.
Right.
And on
right.
top of that, the pandemic didn't just affect the children. It affected households and the adults, right?
Yes,
So,
of course.
So while we might have been focused on children's mental health previous to the pandemic and working with families and parents, you're now dealing with a situation where the families and parents are all going through various mental health issues. And we've seen, I think, more of that where we have families in a household who need more support, which is why the Care Solace for us is just giving parents and guardians and household members that opportunity. Do you all need support? Has something traumatic happened in the house?
Of course.
And we
I mean,
definitely
parents
see-
lost their jobs.
Jobs,
even some
family
of the
members.
kids lost their jobs.
Family
yeah.
member. I mean, we had many students who lost family members in the household
Oh,
during
right,
COVID.
right, yeah.
Right. So we had that. Traveled up, just got uprooted and went to live with other family in other states and countries. Right. So I mean, like there was a lot I think that happened to the family units as well.
Yeah.
And again, I wouldn't put all of it in that one place, but we're seeing a lot of that too. That the families are in need of some support of even their own mental health and also how to help their children.
Yeah, this just
You know,
gave me
the
the
same-
chills just thinking back of everything that we all went through. I
Everybody,
mean,
right? So we don't want to
everybody.
discount that. The whole unit
Yeah.
went through a lot of trauma
Yeah.
and anxiety and jobs and isolation and how my family separated by state and I can't see them, right? So it's just,
Yeah.
there was a lot, I think, that went into this, that to re-regulate ourselves, or maybe that might, but to re-regulate
Right.
our units is
To get back to where we were before.
Yeah, I think that's a serious challenge because you can't ignore what happened to people.
No, it was there and
How
it's
do we-
not, and how do we, so there were a couple of years where we couldn't do anything, and now we can do whatever we want. Well, not whatever we want, but, you know, back to normal. But I have another question for you. What are some signs that teachers or possibly another student may see in maybe their friend or a student? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, do students say, my friend Joe has a problem
Yes.
and I think he needs help, but he's afraid to come forward, or a teacher, I mean, a teacher has a different approach to getting them help, but a student
I think we have
to,
more kids now
do, yeah.
coming forward speaking on behalf of they're nervous,
good.
right? They're
Yeah, of
nervous
course they
and
are.
they're anxious and
Yeah.
they want to help and they don't know what to do.
Right,
So I think the past couple of years we've seen more kids reach out on behalf of because they don't know who else to go to, which is
Right.
great. I
of
mean,
course
that's
it is,
great.
yeah, that's great.
And it's something that we actively teach. You know, we
Yeah.
explicitly teach kids how to seek
Yep.
help from a trusted adult and like how to ask for help.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I think I think that's contributed to an uptick in students actually, you know, speaking up on behalf of their peers. But you know, some things that we recommend students look for and be aware of. You know,
Yeah.
if students are isolated, if they're inactive, if they're acting differently, if they appear to be kind of withdrawn, if they're making any indication that they want to harm themselves or another person.
That's scary. Does the friend get angry with their friend who asks for help for their friend?
It definitely happens. And
Yeah.
you know, we will engage in a process with that student and talk to them about like, you did the right thing. You got your friend help. And
Yeah.
we'll actually, this is embedded in some of the curriculum that we offer our students, where we talk to them about like, what would you do if a friend told you that they were going to hurt themselves or that they were thinking about killing themselves? And we put them in a situation where, you know, they have to actually kind of think about it. And we always kind of, you know, punctuate that discussion with, you really need to share the information. And they might get mad at you. We
Yeah, of
prepare them
course,
for
yeah.
that. You know, they might get mad at you, but, you know, what's more important, you caring for your friend and them being mad at you, or them potentially, you know, causing some severe harm to themselves, or
Right.
potentially killing themselves. You know?
Right.
So it really has to be the case that we broach that with students so that they feel comfortable in
Yeah,
those
they want that
situations.
friend around till they're old, you know, go to school together, go to college together, you know.
And they are facing these situations.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's a lot to put on a student to determine whether or not their friend is joking or not.
Right.
So we've seen that
Yeah,
too,
that's-
right? Where we don't,
yeah.
you know, 20 years ago, somebody joking about wanting to hurt themselves, we might
Yeah.
not have taken it was a joke. It's not I mean,
Not anymore.
we just don't,
Yeah.
right? Like we don't expect a student, a parent, nobody, a teacher, anybody to make that judgment. And so I think teachers have been awesome too. If they sense or hear anything, they will report it right away to one of the guidance counselors or administration.
Yeah.
So it allows us to have the counselors know what questions to ask, dive a little deeper, talk to the parents, you know, what's going on with the student.
And-
Whether they put it in writing, you know, they might put it in a journal or some kind of document that's shared with friends,
Yeah.
you know, in a Google Drive.
Do you see kids who are, I don't want to put this question, so if a kid is normally upbeat and, you know, whatever, and then all of a sudden they just decline and they're just like mopey, depressed, or, I mean, could it be like they're dealing with one issue and they can overcome it, or?
It could be any number of things. It
Yeah.
definitely could be an isolated incident. That happens all the time, and when we, you know, I think this is a good example of kind of like why we have to bring students in after screening. Like,
Yeah.
let's pretend like, you know, we found within an anxiety screener or a depression screener that a student scored in an elevated range, and we want to talk to them. They could be having a really miserable week.
Yeah.
They could have had a couple incidents that happened, but generally speaking, they're in a good place. They have a good support system. They don't need long-term care. Great, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of other situations where it's that decline that you were talking about is something indicative of a longer lasting problem that needs help.
Right. So I asked a couple of my friends if they would, that's where some of these questions came from. And one wanted to know their child had to be brought in for an issue and it was taken care of, but she had to, take her somewhere else to be seen by a therapist. But do you follow up after you've identified a student with a problem and you deal with it in the school systems with the counselors at the school? Do you follow up with that child, after they've seen you?
We do, and a few things here. One, we're going to offer care,
Right.
From the school.
Aftercare?
During, after,
Yeah.
so for sure, that's something that we want to put out into the world, that people know that we offer these services. And
Yeah.
you can get these services for free from the school. That being said, if they're also going to get services from a community-based mental health agency, that's wonderful, and we're going to ask for a release so that we can talk to the outside provider and so that we can collaborate with them, because it's not necessarily the case that we're not going to be involved,
Right.
Moving forward. We want to know about it, and we want to be able to continue to provide care.
So if you didn't follow up on a particular student and the parents weren't, because they took them to their own therapist, and the parent wondered why the school didn't follow up, what would you say to that?
I would say that, we want to...
It may have happened like 5-6 years ago, just throwing that out.
Sure. So if there's any indication from a family that they want the school involved, that they want us to be involved, then
Right.
we are going to be seeking out their consent to be able to talk to the outside provider. And if there's, I guess my message would be, any time a family wants help and wants us to be involved, we will be involved. So it's an open invitation for any family member to be able to access care within the schools.
And each school has their own therapist, counselor, and counselors are
Yeah, we
in all schools.
Each school has a counseling department, and
Right.
we have multiple individuals in the schools that are school counselors, adjustment counselors, social workers, school psychologists, and all of these individuals, again, within our staffing model, have been trained and are continually provided training and resources and supervision to provide evidence-based services to kids.
And what do you want to throw into that?
I think
As a
that
follow-up.
we've spent a long time having these conversations about how to sort of rethink the school counseling positions.
Right.
20 years ago, it was very different. And the needs have changed, and so how do we adapt? I mean, we do this in all of education, not just counseling, but we're here talking about counseling. How do we adapt to the needs of the students that we're servicing,
Right.
And it's not, what classes do you want to take next year as the only purpose of school counseling, or dealing with that one-off bad day, right? We're dealing with kids who have serious long-term, some short-term, mental health issues that we want to help address and be partners with this, as Mr. Crocker said, the families, outside therapists. I think the best situations we've had that I know I've been involved with are when the school's involved, the outside therapists, everybody's transparent, parents want help, like everybody's on the same page so that
Right.
the student feels, right, they have a place to go in school when they're not feeling well, or they know everybody's on the same page, and we have a lot of that happening
That's great.
right now in all the
So
schools.
we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in a minute or two or three.
The innocence of youth. Is there anything any better? But soon they'll be in high school and facing all the same challenges you faced. How to make friends, how to fit in, how to be cool. We want our children to have everything they'll need to live fulfilling and productive lives. Make sure the kids in your family are among the more than 230,000 participants here in Massachusetts who take part in high school sports.
What rhymes with great?
Participate.
Where does greatness start? Here, in the classroom. On the diamond.
In the pool.
On the field.
Where will your greatness take you?
To better grades.
To more friends.
Be great.
Participate!
And we are back from our break, and welcome back to From Stigma to Strength. keeping you and your mind well. And we're back again with Superintendent Kwong and Mr. Crocker. Do you have a title, or is it?
Director of School Mental Health.
So it's not hey you, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, only to your friends, right? So welcome back, and we've discussed some great topics, and I appreciate it. So now we're going to move on to some fun stuff. So you have therapy dogs in the schools now.
We do.
How are the district's new therapy dogs impacting students' mental health, or even the teachers? I would love a puppy by my side when I work.
We're so excited. I'll let Mr. Crocker talk about it because it was his bringing it all together. But we have wanted therapy dogs in the school for several years now, just knowing that they're going to make an impact.
Right.
And just all the other districts and schools around us that have a therapy dog or two. So we are excited that we were able to partner with an organization that has some therapy dogs around us nearby. And I think we've had them in the grammar schools. We haven't had them at the high school yet.
Not yet at the high school, no.
But we're working on it. Yeah.
Yeah, the organization is Therapy Dogs International, and we've been partnering with a couple individuals there who are local, and they have some of actually one of them is a retired educator and just wants to be back in the schools.
Right.
So I mean, the feedback that I've received is that the kids love it. The staff loves it. Right. I mean, and that they're just really appreciating the opportunity to be able to have that a little bit of a break, a little bit of just opportunity for some calm, and it definitely changes the atmosphere for sure.
So how many dogs? Now, Methuen Life did an article on it, and I tried to find it last night and read back on it, and Melissa had some great, I dropped her name. Yeah. But she said it was a great story, and I tried to go back and find it, and I just couldn't find the time yesterday to do it. But we wrote some stuff up for her, and she probably went to the schools and took some pictures of we have two dogs. She did, right. We have two dogs that are, so one dog I think goes to two schools, and the other dog goes to the other two schools and is shared during the week. So they're not full-time in the school with the school staff. They come in and have a schedule where they come in and do visits. So with the principals and the guidance counselors, they kind of decide where they're going to go, or if they're going to visit each classroom, or
it is on a kind of a rolling basis. So they rotate through. Some classes will request. They can put a request through to have the dogs visit. So it's been nice to be able to provide a little bit of flexibility and autonomy for the schools to be able to kind of figure that out.
Yeah. Right. So are they? Yeah. So is it the same dogs that come in, or do they rotate different dogs?
Same.
Yeah. So now, this program, does the school department have to call them to come into the schools? We'd like to have the therapy dogs come in. What do the kids call them? Are they therapy dogs?
They call them comfort dogs a lot of times. Right. So we set up a schedule with the individuals that work with TDI, the Therapy Dogs International, and so it is the case that we had to kind of work through schedule and arrange for them to come in. But once it started, the schools really took over and decided kind of like, we want to see them on these days and in these classrooms, and it's worked out well to
And how often are you going to have them come in? I think you said that, but
they've been coming in for on a weekly basis for
you did say that.
A year. Yeah.
We were able to start it in the fall.
Do you start it? Do they go to say they come in on a Monday and they start at the CGS? Do they stay at the CGS all day, and then another time they go to the Tenny or the Timony?
No, so we have one owner and a dog that goes to two schools, and we have another owner and a dog that goes to the other two schools on a scheduled basis. So they're not there for the whole day. They're there, so the principals and the counselors know they're here on Monday from 11 to 1 and Friday from 11 to 1.
So the teachers will make a schedule?
Yeah, so the schools will make a schedule and say, okay, we'll have our comfort dog in 2 days this week during these times. Do we want them to go to these classrooms? Do we want them to just tell people where the dog will be?
And the kids can
come. Yep, so the kids can come to the dog. That is so cute. So when do I sign up? And each school does it very differently based on the needs of the school. So
when can I go see them? I mean, I would volunteer in the school for that day.
Very cute. They're very cute.
So you haven't brought them to the high school yet, or have you?
I haven't brought them to the high school yet, no.
Yeah.
No.
Do you plan on that?
I think when we started in on this process, the goal was to get it into every building. So it's just one of those things where we're scaling it up over time.
Yeah.
Right, so it's been working out well.
It has been.
Yeah, so
We
it
thought
must
we were
help
only
the
going to be able to
teachers.
do it in 2 schools when we started.
Right.
Yeah.
But then we had a second person in the area who was able to help us too.
Yeah.
So we thought we were going to have a small scale,
Yeah.
which we did for a few weeks, and then we had another person from the Therapy Dog International that was
and-
around here.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, my dogs wouldn't let anyone go near them. They're,
They're wonderful. They're
yeah,
very
I
happy.
bet. I bet. So I wanted to
dogs.
ask you before we started taping, you had mentioned that. I had mentioned that I want to bring a group of kids on here to talk about, amongst themselves, and hopefully to have one of the counselors join us to help me. So you have a group in the schools with the kids.
We do.
A
we
support
do.
group from each other.
So it's called the Mental Health Parent Student Advisory Council.
Okay.
So we actually started this years ago and have reconstituted this group as of this year. So kind of brought it back and scaled it up again. So right now we've got students at the high school. We're starting to do some recruitment at the grammar schools. We have a bunch of parents that are part of the organization as well, the group, and it serves as a platform for them to be able to contribute to the work that we do and to provide feedback and engage in some of the awareness building and the promotion of the work, give us some ideas, provide their perspective. So they've been wonderful. We're actually bringing a group of them to a youth mental health summit next week in Danvers to be able to work with other high school
Right.
groups who have a similar mission of being able to promote
that's pretty cool.
awareness around mental health. Yeah.
So this is a hard question. If there was a student who lost their friend to suicide, how do you deal with that friend?
I mean, I think that
How do you comfort
Help.
that friend,
Yeah.
help them?
we want to be able to provide any semblance of care that we can.
Right.
That person is going to react everyone's going to react differently, and we want to be able to meet them where they're at and provide them the care that they want also. I think it's also important that we don't presume that it's going to be the same kind of care for every person.
Of course.
So I think there's a lot of offering to help, a lot of assessing what the actual needs are, being able to stay in contact, being able to keep the lines of communication open. They might want help now, they might want help in 3 months,
Right.
they might not want help, and that's okay. So we want to just, meet the student where they're at. I think, could it look like individual counseling? Sure. Could it look like group? Definitely. Could it be, a referral to an outside agency? It could be anything. And I think at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we're attending to the students' needs in a way that makes sense for them.
Right. I mean, there could be, say so-and-so decided to take their own lives. They didn't leave a note. None of their friends had any clue. Their parents had no clue. They were active in sports, active in groups, active with their friends. Just out of the blue, something snapped and they took their own lives. There's never going to be an answer as to why. But do you ever find an answer? Does anyone ever find an answer as to that why? Could be like a year down the road, or...
I have to imagine that there are situations where people are searching for a why, and they search for that why for a long time and
Yes.
maybe don't find it.
Right.
And that sounds devastating. That sounds incredibly difficult. And
No closure.
Sure. I think, for individuals who are grappling with that horrific loss, they're going to need different kinds of support. And it may be that they don't find the closure that they were seeking, but they find some degree of a way forward.
Right.
And maybe that's with help, and maybe that is, their own journey on their own. But I think it's a tough question to answer, because I think that people are going to react in different ways, and that's okay.
Right.
In terms of always getting closure, I don't know that that's a thing that we can bank on. I don't know that we're always going to be able to have closure.
Right. It's not like if somebody was taken from in a car accident. I mean, what happened, in that car. that's what happened. That is, you're never going to find closure to that either, but it's a different kind of closure. So, but anyways, I want you guys now to discuss more. 'Cause I ran out of questions. Now it's your turn.
All right.
You're not asking me questions. I don't have answers to anything.
I think a big topic that needs to be out there for our students and our families and our educators is social media and the effect that it does have on our students' mental health. I think when the Surgeon General came out, within the past year and said that social media is doing harm to our children, I think we really need to pay attention to that. And we plead with parents. I think it's hard to keep up with the technology, but again, I'd plead the case here that there are ways to monitor social media. There are ways to say no to social media. We are seeing kids, and I say unfortunately because it is unfortunate, as young as 3rd grade having cell phones and understanding social media. It just means they're exposed to things that they typically developmentally wouldn't be exposed to for multiple years ahead.
Or shouldn't be
right?
exposed
Or shouldn't
to.
be exposed
Right.
to. So, again, I just plead. I have seen that as an administrator in the public schools for 22 years. I have seen what it does to students. I reacted as a parent with my own daughter because of what I saw and experienced as an administrator.
Right.
I'm very happy that I did that. She wasn't always happy, but it can do some serious harm to our children. And I just, as much as we educate our kids on the do's and don'ts on social media, and pictures and videos, and things don't disappear, and bullying is bullying, whether it's on an app or face-to-face at the playground. And so it's taken a lot of time and resources from our school staff to investigate those kinds of issues as well. And a lot of times parents just really they just don't know what's been
Clueless?
happening.
Yeah.
And then, when they do find out, it is very helpful because they ask for our help, right? They're like, we just found this out, and they're taking snapshots of all kinds of conversations their kids are having on.
What do you see the biggest issue with social media? The conversations you just said they're taking
I think the fact that kids feel they can say and do whatever they want and not get in trouble is very, very alarming.
Really?
Very alarming to us. And it typically lands, typically lands, I think, one of the other things that is super challenging for us, it lands with us. And meaning somehow it always lands in the schools. And so the schools have to take care of it. And it may be issues that happened outside of school on social media.
Yeah.
Right, but somehow it's landed in the schools. So
schools,
now our staff is involved. The school service officers are involved. There's investigations that are happening and time that is spent.
Oh, good
And I
grief.
do think that is, I hope I'm making myself really clear because I'm passionate about this. But
Look right in the camera and say it.
but it is absolutely harming our kids, and we don't have enough oversight over it as adults in our households. When we get the information to schools, we do what we can, but we can't be there and parent. And I can't even take a cell phone away from a kid and keep it, right? Like that's
Why?
that's property of the adult. So I'd have to give it back to the parents no matter what. So there's a lot of rules around that, right? And if it's certain kinds of pictures or certain kinds of videos, it has to go to the school service officer for investigation. Parents have to get involved.
Oh, you mean naughty pictures?
Naughty pictures,
Wait, kids?
threatening pictures.
Our kids are sending around naughty pictures of each other, or?
Yep, or of themselves. Yep. So sexting is a big issue that we deal with for our adolescents.
Oh, sexting.
Yep.
Old ears didn't hear you.
Yeah,
That's
sexting.
horrible.
Yep. And
So the parents don't know about this, that this is
Correct.
going on?
Yep.
On top of it's
I thought this was just something that happened.
But this is where we talk about like all of these things together, right? Kids are seeing this, and if I'm now a student and I'm not part of this group, or right, this is where the mental health issues start coming in because they don't feel that they're part of a group or they're going to miss out on something if they're not on this app all the time. It really does a
FOMO.
number, on students, right? Self-confidence and self-awareness and conflict resolution. It's a really hard place to be, in a very difficult transition that we've made in the schools to try to and we're trying to stay. We're definitely not ahead of it. We're trying to stay with it.
Here I am thinking this is like a Lifetime movie moment, but no, this is a real thing. But
no, these are real things. Threats, kids threatening each other.
I realize they are real things, but so this is my thing. If a boy took a picture of his girlfriend and it was inappropriate,
yes,
and now he's sharing it with his friends.
No good.
So they're sharing it, he's sharing it with their friends, and of course now they're not dating anymore.
Right.
This picture's out there.
Correct.
So this is going to ruin this girl's life.
Correct.
And could bring her to harm herself. And then she's going to think that this boy doesn't care. Of course he doesn't care. He shared this picture with everyone, or vice versa. It could be the girl taking a picture of the boy, or that's terrifying.
Pretty much explained some situations.
Terrifying.
Yeah, so those are the things that we try to, hone in on with the education part of this, especially at the grammar school level, 5, 6, 7, before they start getting into relationships and things like that, about what those pictures, you don't ever do it. Trust or no trust, right? You don't ever do those things, because it can lead to a situation like you said, or it could pop back up 5 years from now when you're applying for a job. It could pop up
applying to college.
Yeah, it can pop up wherever. And so we really try to make that point known when we're talking to the kids about it. Our SROs also go into classrooms and talk about it with kids.
School resource officer.
School resource officers, school resource officers have gone in. We've had where we have influxes in different issues with cell phones or behaviors like that. The administrators and counselors and SROs will go in and talk to the kids about. Yeah.
So what do you do if a situation like that comes up? I mean, how do you? That's horrible. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, to Brandi's point, we're talking about getting an SRO involved potentially, and that this is going to lead to. I mean, if we're
I'm going to interrupt you one second. That's a criminal act, though, sharing child pornography.
It is.
Which is why we would get the SRO involved.
Right.
Wow.
So serious consequence. So this is for both. Yeah. So now you have, let's say, 2 15-year-olds who thought this was a harmless, whatever it was.
Yeah.
2 totally devastating situations now for these 2 kids. This one, mental health. Right, the girl is now dealing with mental health issues that aren't going to go away easily and quickly, and you have the boy who shared those pictures, who's now going to experience some pretty severe consequences for doing that. Right, and not doing the right thing.
And equally as harmful.
This is what I'm saying, and you have also situations where both parents probably unknowing that any of this has happened. And are devastated for both situations, right? So we're working with the whole situation.
Then what's worse is the blame game comes in with the parents. Your son took a picture of my daughter, or your daughter took a picture of my son, so it's his fault. No, it's her fault. So that causes.
We deal with each student individually and each family individually, and hope that parents.
Like they don't meet outside. I mean,
but we hope.
Unfortunately, it could happen.
We don't talk to parents about what we are doing with other students, but
of course,
but in situations like these, I think people know that we are not taking these situations lightly at all in the schools when these happen, because of the seriousness of the effects that it has on students. Yeah. And their mental health. I mean, these situations can cause kids to, spiral downward, and they are embarrassed by it. They don't want to share it with an adult that this happened because they feel they did something wrong. Right. They're not asking for help right away when things like this happen, because they were in a relation, they were boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever the situation was. So it does shed light on the fact that, we try really hard to just make a safe space for kids, so that hopefully that girl at some point goes to somebody, whether it's a friend that she speaks to and reports it, or a safe adult in their home or outside their home or in the school that can report it. I think all of those things are just critical in this kind of situation. But we see those.
I'm sure there's gossip that goes around the school between the kids, and
I mean, I will say this. Yeah, it does. A whole other layer. So we've got not only the toxic communication that's happening through social media, and ultimately this causing a lot of damage to kids, but then I have to add this other aspect of social media where kids are getting really terrible information about mental health and about how to ask for help and about their own well-being, such that we've had to provide education to younger and younger students because they are getting information that is just terrible and misinformation about their own health.
Like examples.
So an example could be, a student seeking out what is depression, and looking at a TikTok video and thinking that they're going to get some quality information from
Right.
that. And the reality is that this leads to maybe them self-diagnosing or labeling their friends or thinking, reinforcing stigma. Sure. So we've had to provide a ton of education, and again, increasingly younger and younger, because kids are exposed to these topics. They're exposed to topics around depression, anxiety, trauma, suicide. They are getting exposure to these topics. And if we don't provide good education about those topics to correct some of the misinformation that they're getting,
Right.
it could lead to some really serious problems down the line.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the program, when they run the credits, we've added some helplines. The Trevor Project's 988, the Suicide Awareness helpline, and other phone numbers, and so if you can provide a phone number to our graphics person, to get in touch with you for any help.
I would also say that we've put together a resource page for students. So
Right.
it's organized by topic so that students can access.
And where can they access that?
Yeah, the web link on our website. That would be really good if you guys could add that.
Okay, yeah,
Because parents
yeah.
and students can go to that, and there's a lot of information there that we try to share all the time through our newsletters, but it's definitely on our website, and it's pretty comprehensive, so parents can find phone numbers, and again, like Mr. Crocker said, by topic. That would be really helpful.
I'm just blown away at the social media thing. That I know this is a real thing, but you don't want to hear that it happens in your own schools.
Yeah, no.
So that's really sad.
I would say I don't want to put a number on it, but a good amount of student situations that our schools, our counselors, and our administration are dealing with are because of, or cell phones play a role in it somehow.
Yeah.
The social media plays a role in it somehow.
Yeah, it's horrible, absolutely horrible. So, and the other thing that kills me, these stupid TikTok challenges. First was the Tide Pods thing. They clean your clothes, not your mouth. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not toothpaste. And
Potato chip thing.
I don't want to know about what the hot chip.
Yeah.
Oh God, I would have heartburn for
We've
years.
had those run through the schools. They end pretty quickly once the kids try it and they're alerted to it. We try to alert parents. I've sent letters home in the past, not recently, but in the past when it was becoming a really big thing. I think it was right after COVID, the TikTok challenge about taking and destroying school property. That was a big one. I had to send a
I never
note
heard
home
about
to
that
parents. Yeah, kids were ripping things off of walls in bathrooms, and so that was a nationwide TikTok challenge. What can you steal from the school? And then kids would videotape themselves on the school bus with a napkin holder from the cafeteria that they ripped off the wall.
Yeah, that's gonna
it
go
was
well
bad.
on the college application when they look that up.
Yep, so we tried to squash that one.
So many things have happened to. Why do they do this? Just for clout? Just to say they're cool or whatever? But I don't get it. But I'll give you a minute to give closing. I was going to say closing arguments, but we're not in a court, so I don't know what's on my mind. Give you a minute to just closing words.
Sure. No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about.
I appreciate you joining us, both
For
of
sure.
you.
Happy to. I'm really proud of what we've done in Methuen. At the end of the day, we've created a comprehensive system of supports that any kid can access, that extends into the community. We have phenomenal staff who are expertly trained and provide really quality services, and that's not the case in every district.
Right.
This is a very special place, and a place that has a lot going on to support students, and we're seeing that when we actually kind of look at the data over time. Our kids are reporting less anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, and that's wonderful. That's what we want. But I guess I would end with, health is not something you arrive at.
Right.
Health is something you maintain over time. Health is something you invest in over time, and Methuen's made an investment that is paying off, but it's something that is not we're not going to get to a point and then be able to just stop. You know, this is the kind of thing that we've created a system of support that that is doing right by kids, and I'm thrilled that we're maintaining that.
That's great. And Brandi?
I think just to reiterate that, you know, for me, I've seen where we've come from and where we are and where we still need to go. You know, I think that for us, the fact that this conversation is not a challenging one here just makes it so much, you know, bigger and better for us that we have, you know, a school committee, we have a city council, we have a mayor who's invested in mental health in the community at large and supports what we're trying to do in the schools. And is it perfect? No, but we're working, you know, every which way we can to support the kids that we can, and we've come a long way. I mean, you know, our counseling staff and our training that we've had is just, it's come so far. And again, we still have, you know, a ways to go to maintain and
unfortunately, it's a never-ending crisis.
It's a never-ending, and we're fine. And again, it's that adapting, like we were seeing kids have different needs the last couple of years than we have the previous couple of years. So how do we adapt to that, and what do we need to do in the schools, which is part of my job, to lead the whole team on, okay, what do we need next year? You know, what is it, why is this different, and what do we need? And that goes through the process and the budget process and why we're asking for different things. You know, and I think we're seeing that more and more. It's not just, you know, we're definitely not doing the same old thing. You know, year after year, we're really looking at the amount of data we have, the services, the kids, how they're coming to us, and what services they need and what we're going to do about it. So, again, it's an ongoing conversation. It's not going to end, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to help service our students and families and staff. So.
Thank you both very much for joining me today, and you know,
thank
I hope
you for having us.
Yeah,
I think this is it's wonderful that this conversation is as public as it is. I don't think 5-10 years ago this conversation would be as public, and so I think it's helpful.
It's more open now, but again, thank you very much, and we've come to the end of our show, and that went by fast. And thank you again for joining us on From Stigma to Strength, keeping you and your mind well. And remember, it's okay not to be okay. Have a great day.